The next collapse, why your city was secretly chosen to fail. The notices went up on a Tuesday. Routes cut, permits paused, temporary emergency budgeting. By Friday, the best engineer on the rail line resigned after another 90-minute delay. She didn't slam the door, she booked a one-way ticket after missing her kid's school pickup for the third time in a month. She folded a crayon drawing into her laptop sleeve and walked out without a goodbye party. That week, 3 founders moved their teams to a city they'd barely visited. Nobody shouted. The decision had already been made for them. Get this, your city was financially marked for decline. 3 hidden mechanisms decide winners and losers. The brain drain is already moving. This isn't incompetence, it's a managed transition using policy levers. There's a silent weapon, quiet beneficiaries, and a map. To see it, go back to the first small cuts and hear the clock start. Pillar map, the promise and the road ahead. Here's the map you weren't shown. 3 pillars, 1 outcome. First, the deprioritization playbook, a repeatable sequence that pulls stability out from under daily life. It starts with starving infrastructure, maintenance deferrals, pilots that never graduate, capex shifted to future-proof projects while today's systems fail. Then housing becomes a demographic filter, supply constrained at every turn, appraisal games that reward vacancy, and carve-outs that privilege asset holders over families. Finally, services degrade on schedule, transit slows, school rosters thin, police staffing churns, and the insurance bill doubles. The result isn't random decay. It's friction calibrated to encourage voluntary exit by the people who keep a city humming. Second, the beneficiaries, places engineered as magnets. They remove friction by right permits with service-level agreements, infrastructure funded before growth, schools tied to performance contracts, visas and credentialing aligned to pull STEM workers. Capital follows predictability. Families follow uptime. Companies follow both. Third, the endgame architecture. Controlled corridors that concentrate talent and compliance. Think energy routes that map to fiber backbones that map to payroll capture. Payment rails and tax nexus rules get modernized, which quietly relocates who gets paid when you work from anywhere. Governance shifts from city councils arguing over potholes to standards bodies setting the rules for entire regions. This is where the real power lies. How do we prove any of this? With budgets, mobility data, bond documents, filings, permits, school and transit enrollment. Clean paper trails. You don't need a leak when you have covenants and ratios. One city crossed the point of no return last year. Not because of one scandal, but because the ratios that predict insolvency flipped while everyone argued about the vibe. We'll get there. For now, watch the triad that breaks daily life. Movement, shelter, services. Hit those levers in sequence, and the people you want to keep will leave on their own. That's the promise of the playbook and the road ahead if you don't spot it in time. The deprioritization playbook. To understand how a city is taught to fail, you start with what people feel from the moment they wake up. Movement, shelter, services, hit those softly at first. Stakes, when your commute becomes a gamble, your job becomes remote by necessity, and then remote by choice. That choice becomes an exit. When schools close a grade and transit misses a connection, parents start calculating. The city's most productive cohort keeps the city solvent. Encourage them to leave and the math breaks. Action infrastructure starvation looks boring in a spreadsheet. Maintenance deferral lines tick up. The maintenance to new build ratio flips. Instead of fixing the signals, you pilot an app that optimizes dwell time. Instead of replacing track, you announce a visionary extension. The backlog grows, covenants in bond deals quietly restrict quick fixes, and uptime slips under the threshold riders tolerate. Meanwhile, procurement cycles lengthen. The good engineers stop fighting the spreadsheet and find a team elsewhere that ships. Impact, reliability collapses by inches. Ridership never returns to its pre-2019 baseline. The off-peak headways stretch just enough to make daycare pick up a coin toss. That's not a statistic. It's a daily stress test parents refuse to fail. They resolve the uncertainty the simplest way, by leaving. Meanwhile, housing turns from home to filter. The rules that would allow more homes get delayed at committee, then delayed again because the public notice was insufficient. Zoning bottlenecks choke by right projects. Parking mandates force overbuilt garages that make workforce housing uneconomical. Short-term rental carve-outs slip through, sweetened by revenue projections. Appraisals get managed to comps that reward vacancy as a future cash flow. A luxury pipeline flows, predictable fees, predictable approvals, while missing middle projects die of paperwork. Mechanisms behind the curtain, 1031 exchange rules keep equity trapped in the city's highest margin assets, making vacancy a rational option. Institutional buyers target single-family portfolios where cap rates look safe, pushing would-be owners into rent. Rent burdens cross the 50% line for median earners in the places that used to keep families. Schools notice first. Enrollment declines force consolidations. Consolidations push families to neighboring districts. The feedback loop accelerates. A neighborhood gets sold to a spreadsheet. Tenants don't get a notice from a person, they get a portal login. Impact: families leave earlier than they want to. Founders quietly relocate to places where an office permit takes weeks, not quarters. Teachers with 10 years of institutional memory pack their classrooms into boxes and drive south. You don't just lose workers, you lose cultural memory. The PTA president who knows which bus route has been failing for 8 months and why. Services become the pressure point that seals the decision. Police departments lean on overtime because lateral hires won't come into churn. Courts stack backlogs. Small cases take months, then a year. Insurance renewals arrive with a shock, premiums up, coverage narrow, deductibles higher. One storefront takes the hit, then the neighbor can't afford the new rate without cutting night shift. The 24-hour economy that kept streets lively turns into a 12-hour corridor with dead edges. A shop owner stops calling 911 because the response triggers a report that triggers an insurance hike. He hires private security and shortens hours. He doesn't file a complaint, he changes his routine. The budget sequence is the skeleton key. It starts with temporary maintenance deferrals to balance this year's books. Capital shifts to new builds that carry ribbon-cutting photos and federal match money. Service frequency gets trimmed off-peak to save face. Then an emergency appears, a revenue shortfall, a mechanical failure, a storm, just enough to justify emergency debt. That debt comes with covenants. Spend here, don't spend there. Those restrictions outlive the emergency. Next year's budget is already spoken for. Policy fingerprints are subtle. Permit friction rises, an extra traffic study here, a community pause there. The parking minimums stay, even as everyone admits they don't fit the block. Pilot programs substitute for permanent fixes, limited hours, limited scope, limited accountability. Meanwhile, procurement rules lock in a vendor who underbids and overchange orders, tying up capital you can't redirect without penalties. The ratio of staff who can say yes shrinks. Every no takes 5 minutes. Every yes takes a committee. Behavioral trigger: you're not told to leave. You're given just enough uncertainty to decide that staying is irresponsible. The decision feels personal. It's actually patterned. One mid-level PM opens a denial email at 11:42 p.m. Additional traffic study required for a by right addition that would have made a bedroom for a newborn. She stares at the screen and understands she isn't negotiating with a person. She's being sorted by a spreadsheet. Workers with options exit first. They're followed by the small employers who used to field soccer teams and sponsor school plays. The tax base follows them out of town. The countdown starts the moment people stop planning 5 years out. What nobody knew at the time, capital had already shifted. A transit system with falling uptime pays higher borrowing costs. A district with declining enrollment loses the subsidy tailwind. A city with rent-burdened households sees sales tax soften. Ratings agencies flag trends. Index providers adjust inclusion. Large funds rebalance out of your paper, not because anyone hates your city, but because the spreadsheet says risk-adjusted returns look better elsewhere. This is the moment everything changes. The voluntary exits stop being voluntary. Your landlord sells to a fund that won't renew. Your child's school closes a grade. Your commute turns into a roulette wheel. Meanwhile, across a border or 2 states away, a hub is promising permits in 20 days and a school seat guaranteed within walking distance. Families aren't choosing adventure, they're choosing less friction. While that's happening in your city hall, budget meetings shift language. Optimize, rationalize, right-size. The plan is presented as resilience. In practice, it's deprioritization, not forever, just long enough to reshape where talent and capital land. And once movement hurts, housing filters and services wobble, the quietest lever pulls next. People stop planning 5 years out in your city. They plan 5 weeks. That's how a place loses its future without a single headline. Case File B, housing as a demographic filter. Once movement starts to hurt, the next lever makes staying feel financially reckless. Shelter stops being a home and becomes a sorting device. The stakes are simple. Price out families and founders, and schools thin, storefronts lose regulars, and the neighborhood's future goes quiet. Here's what actually happened. Supply that should be routine gets trapped in process. A by-right duplex hits a surprise traffic study. A 4-story infill triggers a context review. Hearings stretch months, then a year. Meanwhile, a luxury pipeline glides through with seasoned counsel and predictable fees. Workforce units stall on parking mandates that force 2 spaces per door, turning the pro forma red. The result is a slow bleed. Approvals without starts, starts without completions, completions that don't match who's trying to live there. Mechanisms sit under the paperwork. Appraisers lean on comps shaped by empty, investor-held stock, so vacancy becomes a feature, not a flaw, future upside validated. 1031 exchange rules trap gains in the highest margin assets, keeping capital circling the same neighborhoods and rewarding holdouts who sit empty for a better deal. Institutional buyers sweep single-family homes in bulk, bidding cash, closing in days, absorbing the starter inventory that once moved young families from rent to stability. A spreadsheet can outlast a lease. Impact shows up as ratios, then as exits. Rent burden crosses 50% for the median earner in core districts. School enrollment drifts down, a grade consolidates, then a whole campus goes temporary. Teachers with mortgages an hour away start looking for contracts closer to home. After-school programs lose volunteers. The PTA's email list goes silent. The housing market didn't just move numbers, it moved people who carried community memory. A micro-story makes it plain. On a block of 9 duplexes, 6 owners sold in a 6-week window to an LLC with a number for a name. Tenants got portal logins, new market rates, and renovation notices that functioned like timed exits. The barber who paid on the first every month couldn't float the repositioning period. He closed on a Tuesday, took down the photos, and handed the keys to a courier who didn't make eye contact. 2 months later, the same shop came back staged with greenery and a letterboard price list. The old clients didn't return. They'd already left the neighborhood. Policy fingerprints are easy to miss. Short-term rental carve-outs stay in place, justified by tourist dollars, but they siphon the last flexible units from long-term tenants. Interim controls freeze small builders while big projects advance under separate agreements. Affordability requirements attach without timelines, turning into chips to be traded for height or parking reductions, in court if needed. Permit counters shrink their hours. Service-level agreements remain goals. A clock that matters to households stops mattering to the city. Insurance adds pressure from the side. Older buildings face premium spikes. Small landlords pass the cost or sell. Buyers using leverage can't pencil without rent hikes. Buyers paying cash can. A family who'd scraped together first and last month's rent loses to a fund that promises to stabilize the asset. Stabilize means no kids on the waiting list this year. Meanwhile, map the effects. Neighborhoods near light rail that doesn't run on time see fewer renewals. Blocks with school closures see listings sit, then sell to investors. A corridor with frequent service and a functioning elementary school fills with people who can pay more fast. The filter doesn't ask your politics, it tests your buffer. This is where the feedback loop gets teeth. As family households shrink, elementary schools lose funding. As schools wobble, families who could have stayed 1 more year decide to move now. As they go, small services, daycares, clinics, after-school pickup vans lose revenue and close. That further narrows who can live here. Singles with flexibility, couples without kids, remote workers whose schedules absorb delays. The place changes without a vote. What nobody knew at the time, capital had a compass. Mobility data showed which census tracts bled commuters and which absorbed them. Lenders flagged zip codes where delinquency rose after insurance resets. Rating outlooks leaned negative in districts with enrollment drift. Funds rotated accordingly. It looked like taste. It was math. There's a tell when a city is using housing to filter instead of house. Rules that keep the middle locked out while luxury and novelty glide. If permits take quarters unless the finishes sparkle, if your lease renewals start arriving with renovation fees, if zoning cleans up signage faster than it fixes lot sizes, you're being sorted. The moment you realize it is small and sickening, an auto-reply from a leasing portal says market rate adjustment, while your kid's school announces a consolidation. That's not a coincidence, it's a timer. Families read the room. Founders do too. They move to places where permits are answers, not riddles, where a school seat is a contract, not a lottery, where a landlord's name is a person, not an inbox. They don't call it escape, they call it planning. Case File C, Service Decay and Security Theater. When movement hurts and shelter sorts, services finish the job. The stakes aren't abstract. Confidence collapses, one missed ambulance, one closed clinic, one unanswered call at a time. Businesses hesitate. Parents set a deadline. Once that deadline passes, they act. Here's what actually happened day to day. Police departments leaned on overtime to plug vacancies that never closed. Lateral hires toured, saw churn on the roster, and walked. Court calendars slid from crowded to clogged. Arraignments stretched, small claims lingered, nuisance cases piled up. Permits for sidewalk dining got faster than permits to fix broken streetlights. The little signals stacked. Graffiti removal paused for pilot evaluation. Park bathrooms locked at dusk. The library cut Sunday hours. None of it made a headline. All of it changed the temperature. Insurance saw it before most residents. Premiums jumped for storefronts after 2 claims in 12 months, then again when the carrier revised risk geography. Deductibles rose, coverage narrowed. A grocer along the bus corridor had a break-in, then a slip and fall. Renewal arrived with a number that erased the profit from early mornings. He cut hours. The bodega next door followed. A block that felt alive at 11 p.m. went dark at 9. Fewer eyes on the street meant more petty crime, which brought more claims, which drove more closures. That's a loop, not a mood. Meanwhile, security theater filled the vacuum. Vendors sold dashboard cameras, blue light kiosks, analytics that flagged loitering. Contract guards appeared in polos with reflective vests. Malls posted no-bag policies. Transit installed fare gates that slowed the honest and didn't deter the determined. The visible presence reassured for a week, then faded into background noise because nothing structural changed. Overtime still carried patrol, detectives still cycled out, dispatch time still stretched. The theater looked like action. It functioned like delay. Here, as the countdown tell, if you see more kiosks than staff, you're inside the last 24 months before the businesses that anchor your block set quiet exit dates. Mechanically, the city ran on unfunded mandates and vendor lock-in. New state rules required more reporting with no staff to do it. Software licenses auto-renewed, eating a slice of next year's budget before council voted. Body-worn cameras generated terabytes that needed storage the city couldn't negotiate down. Each contract came with implementation support that never quite implemented. Each dollar pushed into compliance was a dollar not spent on the predictable. Lights on, bathrooms open, routes staffed. A micro-story anchors it. On a corner that once served shift workers, a cafe owner stopped calling 911. The first time, officers came 2 hours late and wrote a report. The second time, officers came faster and the insurer flagged the address. The premium jumped. The third time, she didn't call. She hired a private guard for weekends, closed on Mondays, and took the espresso machine home at night. Revenue dipped, payroll shrank, tips vanished, and one of her baristas, who also coached a youth team, moved to a city where storefronts didn't need guards to serve croissants. Schools felt it in parallel. Enrollment dipped, classes combined, electives disappeared. After-school programs lost their coordinator to a neighboring district with stable funding. Parents with flexible jobs pulled kids mid-year. Those without flexibility rode it out until the bus route changed again and the daycare waitlist stretched to spring. The district's operating ratios tripped a threshold. Bond disclosures changed a sentence. That sentence mattered to funds holding the paper. They rotated away. What nobody knew at the time, service decay wasn't just a failure, it was a signal. Rating outlooks referenced staffing churn and court backlogs. Insurers updated risk maps. Mobility data showed weekend foot traffic collapsing earlier each month. Verizet-type feeds flagged the drop before the PTA did. Ping counts thinning after 7 p.m., dwell times shrinking on Fridays, school-hour clusters drifting to a neighboring district. The spreadsheets didn't name names, they color-coded blocks. And when a block turns the wrong color for 2 quarters, institutional orders flip in hours. Your clock starts when theirs does. Language inside City Hall shifted to harm reduction, situational response, community ambassadors. Some of it helped briefly. Much of it absorbed attention. Meanwhile, procurement stuck on a vendor whose cameras captured everything except the fix. Working lights, reliable routes, predictable hours, a cop who stayed 6 months longer than the last one. This was the moment everything changed for businesses on the margin. Insurance plus uncertainty beat optimism. They didn't hold a press conference. They turned the sign to closed at 8:30 and never flipped it back. Across a border or 2 states away, a different script ran. Service SLAs with penalties. School performance contracts with transparency, permitting that measured in days. Insurance priced to risk, not rumor. Families who left weren't chasing trendiness. They were replacing theater with guarantees. The beneficiaries, hubs pulling talent and capital. While legacy centers bleed predictability, recipients scale it. The criteria aren't mysterious. Low friction, visa magnets, targeted subsidies, STEM funnels, and rules that say yes in writing. Families aren't moving for vibes. They're moving for uptime. Start with Poland. For a decade, Warsaw, Krakow, and Wrocław built a predictable pipeline. STEM-heavy universities feeding finance and tech shared service centers, then product teams. Foreign direct investment led Central and Eastern Europe because budgets put infrastructure first. Airports modernized, rail corridors tightened headways, and data centers tied into a thickening fiber mesh. Employers posted roles with clear relocation support. Schools marketed bilingual tracks. Rent levels matched salaries. A senior engineer who gave up on a delayed train at home now gets to daycare pickup because a 17:08 departure actually leaves at 17:08. Mexico followed a different route, nearshore manufacturing plus IT. When supply chains craved proximity, Monterrey, Guadalajara, and Querétaro offered industrial parks with turnkey permitting and connections to North American logistics spines. The filings told the story. Multinationals citing lower lead times and talent clusters expanding around embedded software, robotics, and QA. Government rolled out fast-track visas for specialized roles and digitized customs to shave hours off crossings. Families arrived to neighborhoods where schools partnered with employers for internships, and cities funded childcare near job centers to keep parents in the workforce. Founders came because a factory shell converted to a lab in weeks, not quarters. Portugal played the lifestyle card with policy teeth. Tech visas, English-forward bureaucracy, by right conversions in certain zones, and a burst of co-located STEM programs with EU funding. Lisbon and Porto didn't promise the cheapest rents. They promised an answer when you applied to build or hire. Digital nomads tested first. Companies followed with satellite teams that hardened into hubs. The selling point was simple. Everything you need is within 20 minutes, and the city meets its own schedules. Look at the common mechanics. By right density in target corridors keeps housing abundant enough that growth doesn't choke itself. Build-to-rent projects come with occupancy rules enforced by audits, so units don't sit dark while families search. Permits run on service-level agreements that trigger automatic approvals or fee refunds if deadlines are missed. Infrastructure is funded up front. Power redundancy, water capacity, last-mile fiber, and transit tie-ins built before the first ribbon cutting. Uptime guarantees sit in contracts, not speeches. Service magnets reinforce the pull. Schools sign performance compacts, public, charter, and voucher-enabled models competing on outcomes, not slogans. Childcare sits within walking distance of major employment nodes, subsidized by blended finance that ties payments to utilization. Talent visas align with local shortages, so a robotics engineer isn't waiting 9 months to start. Cross-border credentialing pilots let a nurse or a teacher move without redoing an entire degree. The message is consistent. We remove frictions you can't negotiate away. Capital doesn't need romance, it needs certainty. Rising hubs court anchor tenants with performance clauses and clawbacks. Miss your hiring numbers, you pay. Hit your uptime, you get a rate step down on utilities. Sovereign funds and pension capital show up when standards are enforceable. Vendor clusters form because procurement signs multi-year frameworks with transparent pricing and exit options if service slips. It's not cheap, it's clear. And it's running on a clock. Hubs publish SLAs with penalties, and each on-time month compounds trust. After 12 straight months, families lock in leases and schools fill seats. Miss that window, and your city becomes the control group. Listen to how they talk about themselves. Safety, speed, affordability, framed as identity, not aspiration. Mayors publish weekly dashboards, permit turnaround times, transit reliability, school seat availability, median rent as a share of income in target districts. Miss a target, explain the fix by Friday. That cadence builds trust faster than a marketing campaign. A micro story stitches it together. A founder who lost 2 clients to late deliveries moved her ops lead to Krakow for 3 months to test. The landlord answered the phone. The city stamped a small lab permit in 9 days. A local university sent 3 interns with machine vision experience. They stayed. 6 months later, the founder wasn't testing anymore. She was hiring, and her best engineer from the failing rail line showed up with a suitcase and a start date. Meanwhile, a bilingual teacher in Mexico City took a job in Querétaro because the school offered a performance bonus tied to reading gains and guaranteed classroom materials on day one. Her spouse found work at a supplier 2 exits down the corridor. Their apartment lease came with a childcare spot downstairs. Commute, 18 minutes predictable. Week 2, they stopped checking the train app. These places aren't random bright spots. They're inversions of the de-prioritization playbook, where declining cities defer maintenance, rising hubs overfund the backbone and publish uptime. Where declining cities weaponize housing scarcity, rising hubs legalize abundance with teeth. Where declining cities substitute theater for service, rising hubs contract for outcomes and penalize misses. Filings, hiring geographies, and vendor clusters give away the pattern. Job posts shift to these corridors months before headlines catch up. Sovereign funds co-invest in roads, rail, ports, and fiber in the same arcs. Schools expand where employers pre-commit to internships. And families, who don't care about policy jargon, notice that buses meet trains, landlords answer emails, teachers stay, and doctors take appointments on time. If you want a number to hold on to, when foot traffic drops 10–15% year-over-year in your district, Verizet-type datasets flag it, rating notes echo it, and index screens move money within a quarter. That's your countdown. If it feels like magnets, that's because they are built like magnets. Remove friction, guarantee movement, protect time. Capital goes where time is respected. Talent goes where time isn't stolen. Playbook inversion, how rising hubs engineer pull. To see how magnets are built, flip every cut you just watched. Rising hubs don't ask you to endure friction, they prepay to remove it. They write guarantees into contracts, not talking points, and they put clocks on every promise that touches your life. Start with the budgets. Build first isn't about ribbon cuttings, it's about uptime guarantees that trigger penalties when missed. Power redundancy isn't a slide, it's a second feeder line wired before the first factory opens. Water capacity expansions happen ahead of occupancy, so pressure doesn't drop the week the new district moves in. Rail corridors get signal upgrades and rolling stock procurement before announcements about extensions. When a city posts 99.5% transit uptime and pays riders for the 0.5%, that's not marketing. That's enforcement. Movement and shelter get paired by design. Housing abundance isn't a speech about affordability. It's by right density mapped to job centers with clear setbacks, height and parking rules baked into code so planners can approve in days. Build-to-rent shows up with occupancy covenants that punish long vacancies. Short-term rentals are ring-fenced by license volume and unit type, not vibes. Permitting runs on service-level agreements. Miss the 10-day review, the fee auto-refunds, and the app escalates. Builders don't beg. They comply or get denied, with the denial time-stamped and appealable. Services become magnets instead of maybes. Schools sign performance compacts with transparent benchmarks, reading gains by grade, graduation rates, teacher retention. Fail and leadership changes or models shift without a 3-year drift. Childcare sits near job clusters, financed by linked tools, municipal bonds blended with employer contributions, and outcome payments triggered by utilization and parent employment stability. Hospitals coordinate with transit on shift changes, aligning bus frequency with rounds. Public safety prioritizes predictability over theater. Stable staffing, call triage transparency, and deployments tied to foot traffic and incident patterns, not headlines. Talent doesn't move on faith. It moves on visas and credentials that work on arrival. Hubs file national waivers or pilot programs to fast-lane shortage occupations, nurses, teachers, robotics engineers, welders, and publish processing times. Cross-border credentialing agreements let a teacher start as a teacher, not as a volunteer while paperwork lingers. Universities align departments with local hiring roadmaps, embedding co-ops that start as real work and end as full-time roles. Families land on Friday and have school seat confirmations in their inbox by Monday. Capital arrives when it can predict performance and price risk honestly. Anchor tenants sign with performance clauses that cut the rate if the city misses uptime or permit timelines, and claw back incentives if the company misses headcount or wage floors. Utilities publish volumetric discounts tied to verified off-peak load shifting, not backroom deals. Sovereign and pension funds underwrite infrastructure with step-down coupons when reliability targets are met. Index inclusion gets engineered. Green and social label compliance is audited. Impact data is public, and bond covenants prevent starving maintenance to juice new builds. Procurement stops being theater and becomes a platform. Multi-year frameworks pre-clear vendors for core services, with transparent change order rules and exit ramps if they underperform. Agencies standardize data schemas so mobility, permitting, education, and health dashboards mesh. The city hires for delivery, fewer committees, more product managers, and enough inspectors to hit SLAs. When a contractor misses a milestone, the penalty funds overtime for a second crew rather than a press release. Narrative isn't branding, it's a cadence of measurable promises met in public. Mayors post weekly dashboards with 3 dials everyone cares about: uptime, permit turnaround, and school seat availability. Miss a target, the fix shows up with a date. Communication lowers cortisol, which keeps people planning years ahead instead of weeks. That planning is retention. You can see the inversion at street level. A mid-rise goes up by right along a bus priority corridor that actually prioritizes buses. The first floor houses childcare. The lease is subsidized by an employer consortium. The building's grid-tied batteries shave peak loads, earning residents a credit that covers transit passes. Down the block, a public school posts reading gains. The principal's contract includes a retention bonus for top teachers. Kids cross a safe intersection with signals timed to the bus pulse. Parents aren't calculating contingency routes every morning. They're talking about weekend plans. Now tie it back to the map. Fiber goes in the same trench as water and power, future-proofed with spare conduit. Payment rails get modernized so payroll taxes land in the jurisdiction where work is performed, even if the company is elsewhere. That recapture funds more backbone, which attracts another employer, which fills another school, which justifies another housing tranche. The corridor thickens because every layer, energy, fiber, transit, housing, schools, was sequenced, not improvised. Here's where it gets real. A founder runs a 3-city bake-off. Permit a small lab, enroll a kid, set up payroll, get a clinic appointment, and test a transit commute at 6:30 a.m. One city hits every SLA and sends an apology when a permit arrives on day 9 instead of day 7, with a fee credit already processed. That founder doesn't move for a tax break. She moves because she can trust time. The pull isn't magic, it's the opposite of drift. Guaranteed movement, legalized housing abundance with teeth, services contracted for outcomes, visas and credentials aligned with jobs, capital tied to reliability. A city that treats your minutes like assets earns your years. The Endgame architecture, the new map. To see the shape beneath the headlines, zoom out from one city to a corridor. The thesis is blunt. Controlled corridors concentrate talent and compliance. Not by decree, but by aligning rails, rules, and revenues so tightly that moving outside the lane feels expensive. Start with the logistics spine. Energy routes decide where factories hum and data centers cool. Pipelines, HV lines, and substation upgrades don't announce themselves on billboards. They show up as permits bundled with critical infrastructure labels that fast-track trenching. Fiber rides the same trenches, dark strands laid alongside power, waiting to light when the tenants arrive. Port trail alignments link this spine to ships and trucks. Double-stack clearance, on-dock rail, inland ports tied to interstates through weight limit exceptions. When a hub promises 36 hours dock to warehouse, it's because the whole chain shares one schedule. Meanwhile, payment rails quietly redraw who gets paid for work that happens across borders and time zones. Settlement zones designate where transactions clear, and fintech clusters cluster where regulators answer the phone. Payroll processors update logic. Tax nexus shifts from headquarters to work location rules that capture revenue for corridor jurisdictions. A remote hire logging in from a certified zone routes a slice of payroll tax back to that zone. Companies don't argue, they sign up for the certainty. Governance evolves in parallel. City regions begin to matter more than city councils. Compacts cross municipal lines to share standards and budgets along the corridor. Standards bodies, some public, some private, set the rules that become reality: uptime definitions, data schemas for mobility, emissions thresholds tied to tariffs. If a vendor meets the standard, they plug into 10 cities at once. If they don't have a market. Power lives upstream in the standard, not downstream in the vote. Labor gets orchestrated like logistics. Cross-border credentialing turns nurses, welders, and teachers into portable assets. A corridor's registry verifies skills, employers trust the stamp, and visas flow along predefined lanes. Remote tax capture turns location into a budget lever. Work from the corridor, contribute to the corridor, unlock services priced to your contributions. If you're outside, you can still apply, but the line is longer and the benefits smaller. Now layer climate and resilience without the slogans. Corridors cite growth on ridgelines and out of floodplains. Insurance markets reward that siting with lower premiums, which show up as lower rents for warehouses, clinics, and labs. Microgrids sit where hospitals and data centers overlap, backed by long-term power purchase agreements that bank on reliability. Water gets banked, too, via reused plants and rights negotiated years in advance. When heat kicks up, transit vehicles shed load because signal priority was coded to keep frequencies stable under stress. That's not flashy, it's operational. Here's the open loop. One emergency quietly flipped jurisdictional power. When a fiscal crisis hit, a corridor authority stepped in with rescue funds tied to corridor standards, permitting timelines, uptime reporting, labor registries, payment rail compliance. Cities signed because the alternative was service collapse. The temporary measures embedded permanent rules. Budgets began to speak corridor. Purchasing followed. So did hiring. Decisions that looked local became dependent on meeting external standards. Meanwhile, the map thickened along predictable arcs. Employers co-located within 15 minutes of each other to share labor pools. Schools ran shuttles to internship sites along the rail. Housing rose where the fiber nodes intersected with bus priority. Every new element strengthened the rest. And outside the corridor, drift continued. Deferred maintenance, elastic timelines, paper promises without penalties. This is where narrative meets math. Stories about revival matter less than standards and schedules. If your city can't plug into the corridor's data schema, your buses won't sync. If your permitting can't meet the corridor's SLA, your lab won't land the employer that ties your graduates to jobs. If your payroll systems can't route taxes cleanly, your budget won't qualify for the blended finance that funds your substation. That's how architecture becomes fate. A micro-story ties the layers. A medical device startup needs clean rooms, steady power, and a regulatory path. One city offers tax credits and a press conference. The corridor offers substation redundancy, a shovel-ready site pre-cleared under a shared environmental review, a university lab with a validated protocol, a credentialed technician pool, a childcare slot, and a payroll integration that keeps benefits portable if the spouse moves between corridor hospitals. The startup signs by Friday. The credits didn't decide it. The architecture did. The founder's calendar captured the difference, 9 days from permit to stamp there, 94 days and counting here. That gap is a life, not a metric. What nobody knew at the time, the corridor also ran a play on identity. Safety, speed, affordability became civic habits reinforced by design. Commuters stopped checking apps because headways held. Parents stopped hedging because school seats were guaranteed. Employers stopped buffering timelines because permits cleared on schedule. That behavioral patience refilled the planning horizon. People started making 5-year decisions again, which is what anchors a place. Here's the sting. Once a corridor captures momentum, it's hard to peel talent and capital back. The standards aren't neutral, they're moats. Vendors build to them, funds price to them, households plan around them. Your city can resist, but the cost of going it alone rises each quarter. The only credible counter is to build your own spine and interconnect fast. The new map isn't a conspiracy board, it's a set of pipes, wires, rules, and clocks. If you can see them, you can predict where the next jobs, schools, and apartments land. If you can't, it feels like luck. It is. The crisis lever: never waste an emergency. When a city starts to drift, an emergency doesn't just interrupt, it rearranges who gets to touch the budget. The pattern is simple on paper and brutal in effect. Declare fiscal stress, centralize authority, reorder money flows, and embed permanent rules inside temporary relief. By the time the sirens quiet, the operating system has changed. Here's how it happens. A shortfall appears, sales tax comes in light, a transit substation fails, a storm rips a roof off a school. Leaders call a special session. The word emergency unlocks tools that weren't available Monday: streamlined contracting, expedited votes, and access to bridge financing that arrives with a binder of conditions. The public hears, we'll keep buses running and classrooms open. The covenants say, spend here, don't spend there, report weekly, hit these milestones, or your next tranche stalls. A countdown sneaks into the fine print. Miss a target for 2 consecutive quarters and your rates step up. The emergency ends, the clock doesn't. Stimulus arrives tied to land use. New federal or state money says, we'll fund your repair but loosen zoning and transit corridors, legalize more units near jobs, and standardize permit timelines. On the surface, that's pro-growth. In practice, it's a remap. What could be built, where, and by whom shifts overnight. Neighborhood plans that took years of meetings get superseded by corridor rules that favor projects with scale, speed, and counsel. A duplex waits. A 300-unit deal moves. The emergency paid for the latter. The climb belongs to those already trained to use it. Data sharing mandates slip in under accountability. Agencies must report mobility, spend, crime, and school seat data in new formats. It sounds like transparency. It functions like standardization. Once the schema exists, index providers, rating shops, and large funds can parse your city weekly. Miss a service target, your borrowing costs rise. Hit the zoning milestones, your tranche clears. The city is still choosing, but the range of choices narrows to what the corridor will reimburse. The fastest way to see the lever is a midnight vote. A council meets under pressure. A bond covenant is close to tripping, payroll is due, and a storm damaged 3 substations. Staff drops a 300-page recovery package on the dais. Emergency appropriation, zoning alignment for resilience, pilot zones for innovation, and a payment in lieu of taxes deal that swaps property taxes for predictable fees to securitize repairs. Members protest the hour, then read the cover memo that says failure means layoffs. The vote passes. A neighborhood plan dissolves into a corridor map while most people sleep. Impact lands unevenly and lasts longer than the headline. Emergency debt prioritizes hard assets over operating funds, allowable under bond law. That means you can borrow to rebuild the station, but you can't keep it staffed late without cutting something else. Temporary, fast-track rules for big projects stay because renewals ride on them, and renewals come bundled with the next tranche. Grants with reporting demands force agencies to adopt the new data standards permanently or lose eligibility later. The emergency window closes, the architecture stays. It isn't just outside money. Internal authority shifts, too. Budget committees consolidate under a recovery czar. Procurement thresholds rise so larger contracts bypass oversight. Interagency task forces absorb staff time for coordination instead of delivery. Language changes. Right size, optimize, align with corridor standards. The public hears urgency. Insiders hear a new chain of command. Now watch the pilot with teeth. Relief funds seed programs labeled temporary, microzones for autonomous shuttles, modular housing, outcome-based policing grants. Each pilot includes evaluation metrics. If they hit targets, they escalate by rule. A vendor with the right metrics moves from 3 blocks to a citywide contract without a fresh bid because the emergency ordinance allows it. The pilot never ends. It scales. There's a reason rating agencies like this pattern. Predictability. When a city yokes its budget to external standards, spreads tighten for a while. But what nobody sees at street level is the trade. The maintenance backlog doesn't get cleared. It gets reprioritized to corridors that fit funding criteria. A playground repair loses to a bus lane upgrade tied to a grant. A school HVAC fix waits behind a district consolidation that unlocks capital. Each decision is defensible. Together, they push people to adjust rather than ask. A micro-story spells out the leverage. A district with shrinking enrollment needs a roof fix and asbestos abatement. The state offers a rescue, funds in exchange for consolidating 2 campuses and adopting standardized procurement for facilities. Parents show up angry, then see the photos of mold. They choose the roof. The consolidation triggers redrawn boundaries. 3 neighborhoods lose their walkable school. The funder posts a win. A year later, families with options move. Those without options ride a longer bus. Here's the sting: the emergency also rewrites tax logic. A pilot deal cushions a major development through the downturn. In exchange, the developer pre-funds a piece of the transit corridor and commits to union labor. The line gets built. The payments flow predictably to the special authority, not the general fund. When times improve, the pilot sits outside the city's reach. Services elsewhere compete for what's left. The lever isn't always malicious. Sometimes it saves a payroll and keeps lights on, but it's always directional. Money and rules concentrate where funders can measure outcomes that fit their models. That means corridors with standards, not blocks with needs. If your city signs those binders without a counterplan, you're not getting relief. You're getting governance from the outside in. So the test becomes simple. In a crisis, does your city swap ad hoc cuts for transparent SLAs and public clawbacks? Do emergency rules sunset on fixed dates with resident veto points, or do they continue until meeting targets defined by someone else? Are bond covenants tied to uptime in existing networks or only to new miles built? Those are tells. They decide whether an emergency holds the line or hands the line to the corridor. the operators, designers, and beneficiaries. If the crisis lever rearranges the operating system, who writes the code? Start in the open, then follow the quiet hands. Visible first, asset managers with trillion-dollar sleeves decide what paper to hold and for how long. Infrastructure funds bid on pipes, ports, power, and transit with 30-year horizons and fee stacks that reward scale. Global developers assemble capital stacks, equity, mezz, tax credits, green tranches, and deliver projects that map to corridor standards. They aren't guessing. They read covenants and design to the spreadsheet. Now the less visible levers. Rating agencies set the risk language everyone else must speak. A single outlook change that cites enrollment decline or reliability slippage nudges borrowing costs, which nudges budgets, which forces choices that look local but follow the model. Index providers decide inclusion. If your bond doesn't meet the ESG or climate methodology, the biggest pools won't buy it. You're not blacklisted, you're just not in the benchmark. The effect is the same. Data brokers sit one layer down, feeding site selection and capital rotation. Mobility telemetry shows where phones sleep, where they commute, and when they stop lingering on weekends. Spend data shows which corridors are still buying school supplies in September and which shifted to 1-hour delivery in another zip code. Combined, those feeds mark tracts as gaining or shedding the households that anchor a tax base. Funds move accordingly. The barber shop doesn't get a memo, the market does. Philanthropy shows up as policy with friendlier copy. Foundations fund pilot cities, innovation zones, and evidence-based programs. The grants arrive with metrics that mirror corridor standards, permit times, school reading gains, bus reliability. Hit targets, get the next check. Miss, and the coalition shifts to a city that will. It isn't sinister, it's selection. Local policy begins to optimize for what wins grants rather than what fixes frictions fastest. Standards bodies, some public, some industry, quietly write the rules that become reality. Data schemas for mobility, uptime definitions for transit, disclosure templates for school performance, emissions factors for utilities. When a standard takes hold, vendors build to it, auditors certify against it, and capital requires it. You can choose a different route, but you'll be alone, expensive, and late. Who profits? The stack is clear. Asset managers collect fees on assets under management and performance. Infrastructure funds earn stable yield plus upside when reliability hits target. Developers book development fees, carry, and management contracts. Rating agencies monetize surveillance and custom analytics. Index providers license benchmarks to funds that need a label. Data brokers sell telemetry to both sides, cities trying to keep households, companies deciding where to land a warehouse. Philanthropy buys option value, a seat at the table when standards set the next wave. A micro story gives it texture. A corridor authority issues bonds to rebuild a rail spine. An infrastructure fund takes the concession with uptime penalties and a revenue share. A developer wins a station-adjacent mixed-use project funded with a green-labeled tranche that qualifies for benchmark inclusion. A rating agency affirms based on ridership forecasts and maintenance covenants. A data broker shows foot traffic rising. Retailers sign. The authority meets its SLA, the fund's coupon steps down, unlocking a performance fee. A school opens 2 blocks away on a performance compact. Everyone got what they bargained for. Households got predictability at a price set upstream. What about the operators inside City Hall? Procurement directors who can sequence contracts, budget chiefs who can align covenants with uptime, and counsel who can negotiate clawbacks are the difference between adoption and capture. When those roles churn, vendors and funds write the continuity. When those roles hold, the city writes terms, disclosure obligations that favor existing network reliability over new miles, SLAs that pay for fixes where people already live, and sunset clauses that force retrade if targets miss. Their leverage is time. Publish the clock, enforce the penalties, and shorten the window for drift to zero. If you don't run the clock, the index will. Here's the tension. The same institutions that can starve a drifting city can stabilize a disciplined one. Rating agencies tighten spreads for transparent budgets and enforceable SLAs. Index providers reward labeled, audited maintenance bonds that actually clear backlogs. Infrastructure funds pre-fund redundancy when penalties are real. Developers deliver housing abundance when by right rules are credible. Data brokers help target inspections, not just investment. Philanthropy co-funds childcare near jobs when outcomes are measured in parents at work, not press hits. Listen for the tells in their language. Bankable pipeline means projects sequenced to the standard. De-risked means the public absorbed variance. Scalable means more cities will buy this contract if it works here. Outcomes-based means the metric decides the money. If the metric is uptime where people live, the city wins. If the metric is ribbon miles, the corridor wins and neighborhoods wait. So who designs and profits? The answer isn't a villain. It's an ecosystem with incentives that point in one direction until someone rewrites the rules. The lever isn't a secret meeting. It's a meeting agenda with the standard at the top, the covenant in the middle, and the fee stack at the bottom. If your side of the table brings SLAs, clawbacks, and transparency, you buy time for your people. If you show up with vibes, you sell your future wholesale. And that's the choice cities face. Be a client of the corridor buying standards off the shelf, or be a counterpart negotiating standards that protect uptime where households already bet their lives. The operators are ready either way. The question is whether your city has any. Resistance windows, countermoves that worked. Not every city drifted. A few read the tells early and moved fast, not with slogans, but with clocks, covenants, and teeth. The stakes were simple. Either rebuild predictability before people stop planning, or lose them for a decade. First tell maintenance ratios. One mid-sized city published a dashboard that made backlogs unmissable. What was deferred, how long, and why. Then they flipped the ratio in public. No new miles of rail until uptime on existing lines hit 99.2% for 6 consecutive months. They tied bond terms to that promise. Coupons stepped up if the agency missed. The effect was immediate. Contractors scheduled night shifts. Procurement unbundled mega contracts so 2 mid-tier firms could compete, with penalties funding a backup crew. Uptime climbed, trust followed. Permitting was next. The city wrote emergency zoning that wasn't chaos, it was clarity. For 18 months, anything under 5 stories within a transit shed was by right if it met a short form, height, setbacks, stormwater, and energy code. The clock was 10 business days. Miss it, and the application auto-approved with fee credits. They posted a live counter of median days to decision per planner. Staff got overtime paid from the penalty pool when volume spiked. Small builders returned, and missing middle projects that died in committee elsewhere framed in weeks, not quarters. Tenant stability kept families from scattering during the fix. The council passed a paired package. Just cause eviction with relocation assistance funded from a vacancy fee on investor-held dark units, plus right to cure for arrears with a city-backed bridge. The vacancy fee had teeth because data-sharing agreements made empties visible. Investors either leased or paid. Combined with a modest property tax step-down for landlords who signed 3-year leases at fixed escalators, churn slowed without freezing the market. Schools moved in lockstep. The district flagged attrition by grade and zip and offered guaranteed seats plus transportation for sibling groups to stay within a network, even if boundaries shifted. They inked performance compacts with a handful of high-churn campuses, bonuses for reading gains, transparency on staffing, and a pool of roving specialists funded by philanthropy with outcomes pegged to attendance and literacy, not press hits. Families considering an exit got a different message. Your kid has a seat, your teacher is paid to stay, and the bus will show up. Enrollment stabilized by year 2, gains appeared by year 3. Public safety ditched theater for staffing stability. The city froze lateral bonuses and replaced them with retention tiers tied to unit continuity and response times. Overtime budgets shrank as squads stayed intact. Dispatch published live queues with triage categories. Beat assignments held for 12 months, not 12 weeks. Insurance premiums for small businesses ticked down as claims fell and carriers updated the map. Nightlife returned in a narrow band first, then spread as hours extended. They wrote an infrastructure compact with their bondholders. Instead of hiding behind no OPEX, they issued a labeled reliability bond with third-party audits. Proceeds could fund maintenance crews and critical spares as long as uptime targets were met and reported monthly. Index inclusion loved the transparency. Spreads tightened enough to make the premium worth it. The audit firm had authority to call misses and trigger penalty funds into contingency staffing. That put teeth where riders feel it, on platforms, not podiums. Founder retention wasn't a billboard, it was a checklist. The city opened a one-stop counter for lab permits, utility upgrades, and fire code, staffed by inspectors who could approve on site. They guaranteed 72-hour inspections or fee refunds. They matched that with childcare vouchers for employees of firms inside designated job clusters and reserved slots in centers built into new mixed-use projects. STEM scholarships bound to local internships created a pipeline. Visas were fast-tracked under a regional compact that pre-vetted shortage occupations. A founder weighing 3 cities ran the bake-off and stayed because the counter answered on day 1, and the seat was confirmed for her kid by day 5. Crucially, they set SLAs with sunset clauses on emergency powers. Every pilot had a hard end date and a resident veto point. Missed targets shut programs down automatically unless a supermajority renewed. Vendors learned they had to perform, not just present. The council clawed back procurement thresholds to pre-emergency levels on schedule. The message was clear: urgency without capture. Micro-stories followed. A teacher who'd already packed boxes unpacked when her principal showed her a retention bonus and a guaranteed class size. A cafe owner who'd priced a move tore up the lease on a new space because insurance dropped after response times stabilized. A transit engineer who'd taken an offer elsewhere stayed when the compact funded spares and added a night crew, and her agency started paying riders for missed headways. By year 3, the city wasn't flashy. It was boring in the right ways: permits on time, trains on schedule, school seats predictable, and insurance priced to reality. The corridor noticed and connected rather than absorbed. Capital returned quietly because the ratios were honest and the teeth were visible. That's how a city counters the spiral: clocks, covenants, and a refusal to outsource its future. Personal navigation: where to live, build, invest. This is where it gets personal. The next 36 months decide whether you're choosing or being chosen. Start by reading tells, not headlines. Budgets are truth with numbers. Pull the last 3 CAFRs and look for maintenance deferrals creeping up, transfers from enterprise funds to the general fund, and capital shifted to new builds with federal matches. If OPEX is starving while ribbon miles grow, that's a red flag. Permitting is a clock you can hold. Ask for service-level agreements in writing. How many business days to first review? How many rounds before automatic escalation? Are fee refunds triggered when the clock is missed? If answers arrive as targets, not guarantees, assume drift. Pull actual case logs if they publish them. Median days by permit type tells you more than any brochure. Schools are a leading indicator. Track enrollment by grade cohort, not district totals. If second grade shrinks more than kindergarten grows, families are leaving. Pair that with teacher retention and vacancy rates. If the district is consolidating campuses without guaranteed seats and transportation, expect a family exit wave. Transit reliability is a daily life proxy. You don't need a model. Ride at 7, 20, and 5:30 twice each, week apart. If posted headways differ from lived ones by more than 5 minutes twice in a row, plan that slippage into your life or plan to leave. Check uptime dashboards if they exist, then watch whether they publish penalties for misses. No penalties, no leverage. Insurance is the soft tell with hard costs. Talk to a broker about premiums for small storefronts and older multifamily. If quotes jump after 2 claims or if carriers have pulled back from zip codes you care about, the risk map has already updated. Budget for that, or don't build there. Red flags you can't rationalize. Vacancy rates rising while rents don't fall. Capital plans adding miles while maintenance budgets shrink. Emergency ordinances that extend beyond 120 days without sunset. Enrollment declines paired with innovation zones instead of guaranteed seats. Policing stabilized by overtime rather than retention. Permit counters with reduced hours. Bond disclosures adding language about right sizing. Green flags worth betting on. By right permits tied to clear, objective code within transit sheds. Uptime posted weekly with compensation or penalties. Reliability bonds funding maintenance with third-party audits. School performance compacts with transparent staffing and bonuses for reading gains. Childcare within walking distance of job clusters. Visa or credential pilots for shortage roles. Permit SLAs with automatic approvals or fee credits. Strategy is a barbell. Put one hand on a rising hub that already runs on contracts and clocks. Don't chase hype, chase enforcement. The other hand keeps optionality at home. Leases with break clauses, staggered hiring, small footprint experiments near improving corridors. If your city is in a resistance window, visible SLAs, public covenants, and teeth, keep skin in the game. If not, hold optionality and prepare exits. Set your timeline. 6 months, information and positioning. Pull budgets, ride peak transit, test permits with a small application, and put a child on a school waitlist even if you think you'll stay. Line up insurance quotes in 2 jurisdictions. 18 months, commitments with reversibility. Sign leases with break options, pilot a remote team in a rising hub, pre-approve a mortgage in both markets if you're buying. 36 months, hard moves. Choose the system that respects your time, because time is the only compounding asset you can't refinance. Treat these as dead dates, not suggestions. The window narrows each quarter. Founders run the bake-off. File identical permits in 2 cities on the same day. Track days to comments, number of cycles, inspector availability. Call utilities for capacity letters, note response times. Book school tour and log seat confirmation speed. Get clinic appointments and measure lead time. Price insurance and delivery windows. The winner isn't the cheapest, it's the one that proves reliability. Families treat schools and transit as contracts. Ask for seat guarantees in writing. Confirm bus routes 2 ways. If your child's grade is merging, the PTA dissolved, and your after-school provider is closing, you're on a clock. Move before everyone else sets the same deadline. Investors underwrite to enforcement. Favor labeled maintenance bonds with audits and uptime covenants over flashy extensions. Prefer jurisdictions publishing SLAs and penalties. In housing, target by right corridors with verified permit clocks and occupancy covenants. Avoid neighborhoods where vacancy is an asset class. One more tell, planning horizon. If people around you plan 5 weeks, not 5 years, the place is telling you its future. Believe it. Choose the city that guards your minutes. That's where your next decade belongs. Start your clock now. Don't let someone else's spreadsheet set it for you. The hidden cost, cultural memory, and the last flight out. There's a cost that doesn't show up in budgets or bond docs. When the productive class leaves, they don't just take wages. They take memory. How the school fundraiser works, who fixes the boiler for half price, which crossing floods at the first storm, the unwritten truce between the barber and the bodega, the PTA phone tree that finds a missing kid in 10 minutes. Lose those people, and you lose the operating manual for daily life. Here's how it breaks. A veteran teacher retires early after 3 principals in 2 years. She's the person who used to call 5 parents and fill a bus for Saturday tutoring. Nobody else knows those parents by first name or who needs a ride. The program survives on paper, the bus doesn't fill. A coach who handled uniforms off books moves to a district with stable hours. The next season starts late because procurement needs 3 signatures. Kids drift. Small rituals vanish fast. A stoop concert that kept the block outside in July needs a permit now, and the one neighbor who knew the staffer in parks moved for a shorter commute. The permit sits. The summer goes quiet. A corner store that advanced groceries until payday changes hands. The new owner runs a portal, not a tab. A firefighter who used to fix bikes on Sundays gets reassigned across town. Flats sit until parents have time they don't have. These aren't amenities. They're the glue that keeps stress from snapping. The last teacher story is the one nobody forgets. She watched her grade shrink, then merge. She wrote letters to get kids into a science camp that still returned calls. After a year of broken buses and shifting bell times, she packed her classroom into milk crates. The PTA president hugged her in the hallway and said she understood. The president moved 2 months later quietly after the 3rd childcare closure. The school still had walls. It didn't have a memory. When networks break, the recovery window closes faster than leaders admit. New people arrive, good people, but they don't know the backstory. They can't read the room at a council hearing, can't translate bureaucratic language into a fix, can't borrow a ladder from the guy who has 3 because the guy with 3 left. So solutions default to formal programs with intake forms and logos, which help some, but can't replace the call that gets 20 parents to show up tomorrow with folding tables. The last flight out isn't dramatic. It's a text thread. We're going to try the other city for a year. They leave on a weekend between report cards and soccer practice. They don't sell the house yet. They tell themselves it's temporary. 3 months later, they have a school seat, a predictable commute, an insurance policy that didn't double, and a neighbor who introduced them to a contractor who actually showed up. The return ticket gets harder to use with each new routine that works. There's an emotional ledger. Leave early and you feel like you abandoned the block that raised you. Stay too long and you watch the block empty in slow motion. People who move first get called selfish. People who move last get called stubborn. Both are just reacting to the same clock, trust eroding one missed appointment at a time. 2 families on the same street prove it. The first left when the school seat guarantee slipped. They grieved, then found a city where the bus met the bell. The second waited through one more consolidation and one more lease hike to be loyal. They left anyway later with fewer choices and more debt. Cities try to fix memory with campaigns, ambassadors, pop-ups, murals. Some help, none replace continuity. Cultural memory is built by repetition that isn't interrupted. Choir on Thursdays, book club on the second Tuesday, pickup at the rec center at 6. If the bus is late twice a week and the rec center closes unpredictably, those micro-commitments dissolve. The people who used to anchor them already left or are packing. Here's the part most folks miss. Once memory drains, policy gets harder to pass because there's no bench to carry it. You can't stand up a volunteer crossing guard program if the last 3 people who ran it moved to a corridor city with predictable light cycles. You can't reboot a school garden when the only person who knew the irrigation timer's quirks is gone. You can fund the replacement, but you can't speed up trust. The next policy cycle will make choices harder, not easier. Emergencies will come with strings, standards will tighten, pilots will have teeth that outlast the crisis. If you wait to decide until the binders arrive, you'll be choosing under duress. The only way to keep memory is to guard the minutes it depends on, reliability where people already live, or to leave before the last flight is standing room only. The reveal, the city passed the point of no return. We kept hinting at a line that once crossed doesn't uncross. Here's where we stop hinting. Portland, not the meme version, keep Portland weird, but the ledgers, the bond language, the enrollment sheets, the operating ratios. The story isn't a dunk, it's a timeline. Start with the first cut you feel, not the one you read. In 2023, delays turned into defaults on the daily plan. Trains missed pulses, headways slipped, and the downtown grid lost its predictability. By mid-2024, TriMet's reliability still lagged pre-2019 even as service patterns were trimmed to chase on time. Maintenance crews ran hot, spare parts ran thin, and capital dollars prioritized new segments with federal matches over deep fixes. Riders didn't write essays. They bought bikes, cars, or one-way tickets. Housing became the filter next. Permits for small projects dragged while high-end towers with council found the lanes. Short-term rentals stayed legal enough to siphon flexible stock. Appraisals leaned on comps padded by investor-held vacancy, and cash buyers ripped through starter inventory in blocks. Rent burden for middle earners nudged past tolerance. Families stretched. Then they snapped. Services gave the tell. Police staffing churned. Overtime carried core beats. Response times inched. Courts clogged. Schools lost 1,200 students across 2 cycles, then consolidated grades. A campus went temporary. Bond disclosures began to add phrases that matter to funds. Continuing enrollment declines, rising operating ratios, unfunded liabilities that don't look scary on a billboard but do in a footnote. Insurance carriers redrew maps and repriced storefronts after clustered claims. A block went dark earlier. That's not vibes, that's actuarial. 3 policy moves sealed it. Move 1, maintenance deferral codified by covenant. A 2024 capital plan leaned into projects with matched dollars and bright labels. Backlog items got kicked again because grants don't pay for spares. The ratio flipped, more money to new than to keep running. A quiet sentence in bond docs restricted OpEx flexibility, locking the trade. Uptime can't climb when parts live on wish lists. Move 2, the emergency ordinance that rewired land use. A fiscal stress package came with zoning alignments framed as recovery. Corridor upzoning fast-tracked large projects near transit. Interim controls froze small builders pending new guidelines. Affordability goals attached without enforceable timelines, turning into chips for height and waivers. Neighborhood plans got superseded by corridor standards at a midnight vote. It made sense on paper. On the ground, it sorted. Move 3, the revenue fix that wasn't. Payroll and business taxes aimed to backfill, but collections tracked fewer high-wage jobs downtown as the 24-hour economy thinned. Remote work hardened. A pilot to capture more from visitors arrived. It didn't touch the structural loss, families and founders choosing time elsewhere. The gap stayed open. The city reached for one-time sales, swaps, and federal relief. Relief sunsets, rules linger. You can draw the line on a calendar. Fall 2024 into early 2025. Economists in town called it a doom loop. The point of no return wasn't bankruptcy, that's rare and late. It was behavior locking, approaching the line where voluntary exits harden into defaults. Teachers signed contracts in neighboring districts. Mid-career engineers turned a trial month in another hub into a move. Parents pulled kids mid-year, forfeiting deposits to avoid a second consolidation. Once the human ledger tips, budgets follow. The clock is running. The window to reverse behavior gets shorter each quarter. Who left? Families with school-age kids, the tier of small employers who anchor a block, cafes, clinics, studios, and the mid-senior talent that keeps agencies from churning. Who stayed? Service workers without mobility, retirees anchored by equity, and a wave of new arrivals drawn by lowered asking rents and lifestyle. But without kids in the local schools or deep ties to PTAs and park boards, who profits? Institutional holders who can wait through repositioning, vendors with emergency contracts, and developers with corridor-aligned proposals. Where did talent and capital land? Hiring maps lit up in Phoenix, Boise, Austin, and Kansas City, lower friction, believable commutes by right housing. A slice jumped continents, Warsaw and Krakow for product teams, Lisbon for dev pods, Querétaro for embedded software plus factory adjacencies. Filings told you before the headlines. New LLCs created where fiber and rail already lined up. Fund flows followed, labeled bonds in rising hubs with maintenance audits, not promises. One detail looked small but wasn't. Ratings language shifted. Surveillance notes cited enrollment drift, service reliability, and governance risks tied to emergency dependence. Spreads didn't blow out, this isn't drama. They widened enough to make each fix costlier. Insurance premiums ratcheted. Agencies deferred one more repair and prayed for rain. The spreadsheet had its answer. Households felt it as a steady drip that eroded trust. There's a human page. A principal on the east side held her staff together through 2 years of churn. After one more merge, her best reading specialist took a job in a district with SLAs on bus routes and guaranteed prep time. A cafe owner who swore she'd never leave closed after her insurer repriced the corner. She reopened 9 miles away across a county line. Her regulars didn't follow. They'd already moved for a school seat. So was it incompetence? That's the easiest story. The harder one, policy levers and market standards aligned to nudge exits and reward scale. Emergencies accelerated the alignment. Index and rating mechanics, the quiet part, made the cost of staying predictable for capital and unpredictable for people. That's the part that feels like betrayal. An ESG screen decides if your kid's school gets a new roof, and nobody you voted for can override it without paying more. Once that gap opens, it keeps widening until clocks and covenants close it. Could Portland claw back? Always. But after that window, the path stops being a tune-up and becomes a rebuild. Reliability bonds with audits, by right housing with teeth, school compacts with retention, and procurement that kills theater. That's a decade if you start today. Most households don't plan in decades. They plan for next semester. The lesson isn't to gawk at a city you love. It's to learn the tells sooner. Before enrollments drift, before bond footnotes add the sentence that seems minor and isn't, before pilots with teeth turn into permanent scaffolding you didn't vote on. The pattern is legible before it's obvious. The point of no return is 1,000 small choices that add up to one. The shock to come, the next 24 months. Here's the clock. Over the next 2 years, watch for selective austerity dressed as reform. Budgets won't slash across the board. They'll spare corridor projects with external funding and trim the unglamorous. Weekend transit headways, library hours, small park repairs, classroom aids. Leaders will say optimize. Households will feel less. Pilots will arrive with teeth. Temporary innovation zones for mobility, modular housing, or outcome-based policing will scale automatically if metrics are met. The contracts will include step-ups and renewal rights that outlive the emergency. Vendors will be ready before the ordinances pass. Expect asset consolidation. Utilities and transit functions will move to authorities with independent bonding power. School facilities will centralize under portfolio management to unlock capital. The pitch, efficiency. The effect, decisions shift where ordinary feedback can't reach. Visa corridors will harden. Countries and regions already running fast lanes for STEM, nursing, and trades will expand quotas and publish processing times. Remote payroll tax capture will go mainstream. Platforms will route a slice to the work location by default. If you're outside certified zones, withholding gets messy. Inside, benefits unlock. Mark your calendar. The first processing time update you see is your 6-month warning that the line will get longer for everyone who waits. Supply chains will pinch at predictable choke points. Substations at old load limits, water rights in contested basins, bridge clearances that block double stacks. Insurance will reset again after clustered events, premiums up, exclusions wider, deductibles higher. That repricing won't wait for legislation. Payment rails will retrench. Settlement windows will shorten for corridor-certified vendors. Everyone else will face longer terms or higher fees. Municipal disclosures will get more technical. Service SLAs, maintenance ratios, enrollment by grade, and passive capital will rotate to bonds labeled and audited for reliability. That's the invisible hand people feel as a shove. An index you never voted on decides your borrowing cost, and an ESG screen you've never seen decides whether your school roof gets fixed this year or next. It isn't a villain twirling a mustache. It's a model with a timer. Your decision set narrows each quarter. If your city is publishing SLAs with penalties, issuing reliability bonds, legalizing by right housing near jobs, and locking school compacts with retention, you have a window. If they're announcing pilots without sunsets, extending emergencies and shifting assets off budget, plan an exit timeline you control. Position now, 6 months to gather proof. 18 to test optionality, 36 is late, the magnets are already on. Resolution and broader meaning. This wasn't random collapse. It was a route laid by standards, covenants, and clocks that redirected lives. If you want the corridor map and the tells that show up before the binders do, subscribe now and watch the budget deep dive next. We're mapping the fiber lines, payroll rails, and visa lanes that decide where your next decade lands before the window closes.